Remember to do it. So yeah, we are recording this. If you are not interested in having your face on, please go ahead and turn off your screen. This is recorded and will be made available publicly. If you object to that, please disconnect now. We do have a YouTube channel that we've got where we end up sticking some of this stuff, and that'll be eventually we'll get it uploaded sometime in the next week or two. So. Tonight we have John Fazzaro, who is a full stack lean software coach, entrepreneur, benevolent cage rattler. He has been a software professional for over 20 years, holds some certifications, but preferred some books, The Coaching Habit, When Will It Be Done, and Test-Driven Development by Example. John is working with Industrial Logic, who has some incredibly talented and innovative mind thinkers that are there, which I spent a lot of time following. And I'm looking forward to the conversation tonight. John is consulting and shipping better software sooner. And you can find the rest of the story at this link. I actually had the honor of working a little bit for a few months with John at a recent gig with Starbucks, and really enjoyed having conversations with him. It was very eye-opening and mind-breaking for me sometimes. So, which is great.
Thanks, Ken. I enjoyed our work too.
Yeah, it was
All
good. I
right.
feel like we learned from each other, so it was awesome.
Right
Yep.
on.
Turning it over to you, sir.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ken. Thanks everybody for joining. So let me get my slides up here. And we do have, let me drop that link again so we can all see it. And of course, as soon as I share my screen, Zoom decides to rearrange all the windows, so I can't see anybody. Okay.
Let me just pop the link in, or do you got it?
Yeah, if you have the link, that would be helpful.
Hopefully I've got it. I'm kind of my browser window. Hopefully that'll work.
Well, actually, you know what? Or we could just drop it later if it's.
Yep.
There we go. Perfect. Okay. All right. So the everyday magic of ensemble working. So all the brilliant minds working together on the same thing at the same time, in the same space, and at the same computer. If you've heard anything from Woody Zulli, you might find that familiar. That's his definition for what used to be called mob programming. He's currently calling it software teaming. But in between those two, I kind of gravitated toward ensemble working, mostly because of the musical metaphor really holds up, I think. I didn't mind mob programming. I'm actually originally from New Jersey, and my last name ends in a vowel, so I was all in on the joke. But some people found that a little bit aggressive or off-putting. So we got ensemble working, and I guess my first question is I'd like to see a show of hands, either your Meet hand or your Zoom hand or whatever. Who here has worked this way with a team? Now, this ensemble working includes mobbing and pairing. It's kind of an umbrella term. So if you've paired or mobbed with a team. Okay. So a few of you. So and I guess what I want to convey most tonight about ensemble working, this isn't necessarily a, this idea has been around for a long time. I'm not necessarily going to teach you what it's about, but my main premise here is that this is a thing that came from programming. It used to be called mob programming, but it came from the nerds, but I think it transcends working with code. I think that it's, in general, a better way for humans to collaborate on any kind of knowledge work at all. So briefly, Ken already introduced me, so I'll keep this short. I help people make software cheaper and safer to change. And that might be at the line of code level, it might be at the meeting level, it might be at the strategic or product level, but that's essentially the bottom line. And if you want to know more, there's the QR code that goes to the link that Ken already shared. So this is a little redundant. Moving on. All right, so I want to start, I guess, with a thought experiment. Let's say you've had an amazing full 8 hour day of work, and this is the most productive day you've had in a long time. Like you're feeling really good. You just hung up your hat and walked away from your machine. Let's say your job was to write user stories, okay? And you've got this big body of work that you were breaking down into user stories so that your team could really hit the ground running tomorrow with a firm understanding of what the work was, or at least they'd start really digesting what it was now that you've broken it down into stories. And you spent the whole day crafting these user stories. Say you ended up with about 50 at the end of the day, all in Jira, and you're feeling really good and you're excited. You come in the next morning feeling really good about your contribution and how it's going to be received by the team. But there's a kind of a buzz when you get into Slack, and you're seeing messages flying around, and something's off. It's not a good buzz. And you learn eventually that what's happened is Jira is down, right? There's a Jira outage. And that's where all your work was, right? So the team is unable to move forward. They're kind of stalled out. They don't have your work. They don't have your user stories to hit the ground running. Your company is both big enough and smart enough to have an on-premises instance of Jira that they've put up in the meantime, but the backup versus the cloud is about 3 days old. So your work from yesterday is not yet in it. So some teams have Jira. It's not a complete disaster, but your team is not able to proceed. But you also remember that George over in QA is old school and wants everything printed out. And so you hit him up, and lo and behold, he's got all 50 of your user stories printed out on paper. And all you have to do is type them back in. Now, forgetting about AI or OCR or any sneaky way you could get around this problem, the point of the thought experiment is that you are going to be typing these stories back in. So 50 user stories, took you all day to write them yesterday. How long does it take to type them back in from George's printouts? Just call out a number.
Same amount of time all day.
It's going to take you all day to type them back in. You're just typing them off of the paper.
Yeah, or maybe a little bit less time. You're not going to be thinking about them as much.
Okay.
Whether that's a good thing or not, I'm not sure.
Any other ideas? Any other suggestions?
It depends.
Could I clarify that I heard you did 50 user stories in one day?
Wrote 50 user stories.
You wrote 50 user stories in
Yes.
one day? This
Yeah.
was one person or one team?
Oh, one person. Like just wrote each one is a sentence.
What did you write? The titles?
It was
Sorry.
a very productive day.
You could probably
Each user story,
file
okay, let me
the other
clarify. Each
product
user
owners.
story is a sentence, but it's a sentence long.
It's a card.
Yeah.
Jira
That's
makes
a
it
card.
more than that, though. Okay, I'm going to go with Sammy on the one day part.
It's going to take
Why
you
did these
8
need
hours.
to be retyped back in? Because eventually, like the backup is going to come back online. So I don't really feel the need to retype these back in. I mean, most people, if you're working on a user story, if you've already started it, you kind of already know what it is, at least the direction that you need to go in. So you could just continue the work. You don't really need Jira.
Okay, so I yield. You guys get an A+ for critical thinking. It's really just a setup for a thought experiment. You spent yesterday crafting 50 well-written sentences that were rich in meaning for your team, whether they were user stories or whatever. And you are now tasked with typing them back into the computer from a printout because the computer, temporarily at least, has lost them. How long does it take you to type in your work from yesterday that took you 8 hours to do?
Who's available to help?
Well, let's say you had two people.
Yeah.
You had a friend. Okay.
We're talking about 50 sentences, right? I mean, I wouldn't think that would take more than an hour or two.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Any other guesses? Got an hour, we got 8 hours. Anything in between? Okay. All right. So if, let's say Ken's right. Let's say it takes you under an hour to re-enter your work from yesterday into the computer. But you worked your tail off yesterday. You worked for 8 hours to come up with those 50 brilliant sentences. What were you doing for the other 7 hours?
Thinking?
Yes. Yeah. And this is kind of the point that I'm getting at, is that when we're knowledge workers, those of us who live by our wits, so to speak, the fastest typers among us are not the ones who are the most productive. The question is, where does our work happen? And I think we can readily demonstrate it's not here in the fingers and the keyboard. And I'm not sure, like, exactly what circumstances you all work under, but I'm willing to bet that when you're at work, there's pressure from somewhere in the organization or from a client, pressure to be more productive, to do more with less, especially this year. And if most of our work isn't in the typing, if it's mostly in the thinking, then how can we increase productivity? Like, I guess my point in saying that is, if it were in the typing, the answer would be to have a typing pool like we used to, right? To add more fingers, add more keyboards to the equation. And that's how manual work goes. That's how factory, predictable factory work reacts. You simply add more resources and you linearly get an increase in productivity. And that, as has been written since at least the 70s, is not how it works with knowledge work, with brain work, right? It may feel faster at first. It may feel slower at first when you add more people to the team, more typers to the pool. But it reacts in anything but a linear way. So if we're going to talk about productivity, we're going to, I think, touch on the theory of constraints. Is anybody familiar with the theory of constraints? Okay. Can somebody explain it briefly? What's the idea, the main idea?
Want to give it a shot, Natalie? The way I think about it is, for right or for wrong, right, is in any flow or any workflow, right, there's typically something, I'm not going to get the wording right. There's typically something that is holding up the rest of the system. Okay, there's something in, if you think about queuing, right, there's something that is slowing down and holding the system back. Okay. You can identify that thing through measuring how long things take and where work bottlenecks, right? And what we want to do is find where that bottleneck is and work on that, because that is the thing holding the entire system back, right?
That's right.
If you can work on that, then that'll help the system flow more quickly, and then you can find the next constraint that is impacting things.
Awesome, Ken. Thank you. Yes, that's exactly the idea that I'm going for, is the bottleneck, is that the speed of the entire system cannot be faster than the speed at its slowest part. And that's when you tune a system, when you try to make it more productive, you first have to find what's making it slow. And that's your bottleneck. So if we're constrained by the bottleneck and we want to make things faster in knowledge work, and we know that hands on keyboard is not the bottleneck, right? Per our discussion earlier. So what is the bottleneck in a knowledge work system involving more than one human being? I think it's this. I think the speed of a knowledge work team is a function of how quickly its people can share an idea. Speed of a knowledge work team is a function of how quickly its people can share an idea. And by share here, I mean, I don't mean like present, like I'm sharing my screen. This is not the sharing I'm talking about. Sharing meaning we're thinking of this problem in exactly the same way. We have the same mental model of the thing we're working on. How quickly can everybody on the team achieve that synchronicity when, in addition, there's new information flying off of the work constantly as you touch it, as you do it. There's new information, new ideas to be shared. How quickly can the team arrive at the same mental model of the work? That's how fast they can go. That's the bottleneck in the system. And so if we're going to add resources to this bottleneck to shore it up, how do we do that? Do we put more people at separate computers with their heads down? Is that how we do it? Do we have more meetings? Like, what's the solution to this from a productivity standpoint? You know, you could take the approach that's often cited, you know, when you're talking about continuous integration. There's usually, or DevOps in general, there's a phrase that comes up a lot. If it hurts, do it more often, assuming it's a good thing. They always leave out the part of it's a good thing. You know, like, don't bang your head on the wall more, because that just hurts. But if something good hurts, you need to do it more often, like exercise, for example. So if, for example, deploying your app to production every 6 months is a long, painful, drawn-out, weekend-killing process, maybe try deploying it every 3 months instead, or every 1 month, or, you know, things like that. So also, if you have say a sprint review meeting every 2 weeks, and that is long and boring and hard to get people to show up to because it just isn't engaging, and there's so much work to be done to prepare for it. Well, what if you tried having that meeting every week instead? What if you tried having that meeting every 3 days, every other day? What if you did that every day? Showed off what the team did yesterday, got some feedback on it, right? So you want to do it more frequently to improve the experience. Well, there's a lot of things we do in the milieu of knowledge work to solve this problem, to solve the problem of something's in your brain and it's not in mine. And the obvious things, you know, I'm talking about documentation, I'm talking about meetings, I'm talking about emails. And, you know, invariably, when I say those words, part of you inside dies a little bit, because those are some of the hardest and most unpleasant parts of knowledge work, I think. They hurt, but they're good because they're solving this problem. So can we turn something like that up? And I think what I'm getting at is, if we take something like meetings and say, okay, this daily meeting is really painful. We go on for like 45 minutes and then we all go back to our desks to do the real work, right? What if we had that meeting twice a day? We synced up twice a day for 20 minutes only each, right? Okay, now what if we did it for 5 minutes every hour? At the top of every hour, we sync up. Well, what if we just stayed in that meeting all the time and continuously synced our mental models of the work that we were doing together? And I think that's what makes Ensemble working work, is that we have turned the dial all the way up on the thing that hurts until it doesn't hurt anymore, until it just becomes, this is the work we're doing. We don't ever have to do the extra heavy lifting of, I'm going to go back to my desk and I have to make sure I get all the ideas in my head crammed in before I go back to my desk to do my work. And we've also resolved the pain of what happens when I come back from my desk and I have to share my work with you in this tight little window of however many minutes we have to sync up. What if you're already in sync? I was really intrigued by a episode of Radio Lab that I heard years and years ago. Anybody listen to Radio Lab? Great podcast. But there was an episode about project management. I think it was Radio Lab. Now I'm not sure. Now that I'm on video saying it, it was an episode about project management in general, outside, had nothing to do with the software industry. We're talking about construction, project management, any kind of complex project management. And they had pinpointed through a study there was the number one cause of project failure, and it was a factor that they called coordination neglect. And the idea here is that in planning work and doing work, in a complex project with a lot of people, we're very good at decomposing work, breaking up tasks and doling them out. Like, you go do this, I'll go do that, and subdividing the labor. We're very good at doing that. What we are terrible at by nature as human beings is understanding how much effort it's going to take all those pieces and bring them back together into a cohesive whole. We always, always, always discount the effort that's going to take. And coordination neglect that's the number one failure of knowledge work projects. And I think that's relevant here. So if we are working together on the same thing at the same time, together in sync, there is less heavy lifting to do in getting the idea from my brain into yours, or vice versa. There's virtually no coordination to neglect. It's being done continuously. And I think in order to digest this and actually put it to work, though, we're going to have to let go of a lot of the tropes and patterns and things we associate with the way work just is. We're going to have to let go of our old ideas about how work gets done. Notions about, like, well, I'm in meetings all day, so I didn't get any work done. Well, what are the meetings for? Are you not doing work while you're in the meetings? And maybe you're not, maybe they're terrible meetings. But the notion that meetings are not work that's a smell, isn't it? Dave.
So there's a couple of corporate realities here. So two of them come to mind. The first one is, let's say you have a team of 9 developers, or up to 9 developers. Inevitably, you're going to have 1, maybe 2 of them that are senior and who are the stars. Then you're going to have the rest of them being either junior or they're underachievers. And so what you're going to find is the 1 or the 2 that are really good are going to kind of steamroll everybody and basically run all their ideas up there. Probably most of the others are going to go along with it. So inevitably, you have these other 7 that could be working in parallel on something else, versus having 2 people do all the work and then the other 7 are sort of sitting around. Maybe once in a while they volunteer something, and then of course you have the other side of it is, I can tell you as a Scrum Master, you may get asked how the developers are doing on an individual basis, right? Because you can give input in for their, like, appraisals. So these are, I understand the theory, but these are all real world issues that we have to deal with when we go to these corporations. I mean, they ask us to do stuff.
Yeah.
So
I really appreciate what you're saying. I'm intrigued by your use of the word reality, because there are some realities that are different from others, and reality is largely a function of our point of view. This way of working, I'm guessing from the way you've talked about it, this way of working is a theory to you versus the reality of varying skill sets on a team and the problems that might happen if we get people to try to work together in the same room. But I can tell you that what you're describing is something I've seen. But these days, I'd say for the past 6 months at least, based on the way I'm working with my team right now, That's largely a theory. Because my reality is that we work together for 5 or 6 hours a day in the same place on the same thing. We've generally deployed to production about 23 times a day. And we are steadily marching toward building the system that we've been tasked to build, and we're nailing the estimates. So there's a reality behind what I'm talking to you about tonight. It comes from a very real lived experience that I've done with several teams, including the one I worked with just today.
I mean, do
What
you
you're describing are problems. You actually are helping me make the point that I'm trying to make on this slide, is that what you're describing are symptoms of the way we've been working, and there are solutions for them, every last one of them, and they require thinking about work differently. For instance, you talked about trying to understand how this developer performs versus this one, individual assessment. The fact that we have the need to assess individuals versus one another is a symptom of the wrongness, the poor fit for the way we've designed workplaces around knowledge work. That there's a better way to solve the problem that is attempting to solve.
I mean, in theory, for that specific point, I agree, but in the real world, people have to get rewarded for their value, otherwise they'll move on.
The two are
And
not
we
mutually exclusive.
and we shouldn't be rewarding people who, let's say, they're just sitting around and allowing other people to do the work.
Okay, I agree. And the real problem is that we've got people on board who sit around and let other people do the work, that they're not contributing. And there are ways to make that visible and solve that problem that don't necessarily involve an individual assessment or some tying that into a bonus or salary. And there are many, many ways to address that sort of issue. And what's interesting is that I've been in a lot of mob programming situations. I've been in a lot of ensembles. And I mean, since this idea came out, I've been toying with it, right? Since this is about 2011, 2012, I think Woody first published on it. Maybe earlier than that. It's been a while. So I've been doing this for a long time, and I could count on less than the fingers of a hand when that was a problem. What you're describing.
You mind if I play in a little bit, John? Is that all right?
Sorry?
Mind if I play in a little bit,
Oh,
John?
please. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Think about it this way. If the intent is to work as an ensemble, and you've got somebody in that group that maybe is, I don't know, has some of the concerns that you're talking about, it's going to become very visible, not just to that direct person's supervisor, but it's going to become visible to everybody that there's a challenge there. So if anything, you're going to resolve the problem or the issue more quickly because there's going to be more transparency and visibility around it.
That's been my experience, Ken. I agree. Yeah, and there may be also answers to what you're trying to understand, what you're trying to get at in the next couple of slides. So I'm gonna keep going, but let's bring this back up if it's not satisfactory. So anyway, like I said, we're gonna have to let go of the current ways that we work in a lot of ways in order to adopt something like ensemble working, to address this bottleneck, to address the actual problem of productivity and knowledge work. And it's the analogy I like to use is, it's cars and horses. Like, so at some point, our society transitioned from, horse-drawn carriage to the automobile. And a lot of the questions that I get typically, when helping teams and organizations adopt, ensemble working and try this out. A lot of the questions boil down to, this car is great, but where do I hook up my horse? In other words, there's still trying to fit the old way of solving the problem into the new way of solving the problem. And the fact is, you just let go of this part of it and let the new thing solve the problem. So there's a lot of that sort of pattern comes up. So we're going to need to let go of a lot of the solutions we currently have for this and learn to really work together, right? And some of you have already discovered this the hard way. Like, it's not just when you try to ensemble, when you try to work this way, it's not just a matter of sitting together at one computer while one of you does a task, right? That's definitely a failure mode. And it's in fact what most people, I think of when they haven't, if a person hasn't done this kind of work in this kind of way, what they picture is, one programmer typing away and really going at it, and the other one sort of either watching or checking their phone. And so of course you feel like, okay, productivity's just been cut in half, right? As soon as we do that. That is a failure mode. That is not ensemble working. That is somebody goofing off while watching somebody else work. And so what we have to mitigate that, there are some ground rules. There are some mechanics of ensembling that make it work. And I want to kind of touch on those before and then a few minutes later, we're going to try it out and see what it feels like. Because there's really a difference between talking about it and theorizing about it and doing it and experiencing it. There's some things that are really hard to get across in words. So I'm going to do my best to shut up and let us try it out in a few minutes. So Llewellyn Falco arrived at this golden sentence, and he was talking about pair programming back in the day. But this is kind of the golden rule of ensemble working, and that is, for an idea to go from your head into the computer, it must first go through someone else's hands. So this means that if there's a group of people, 2 or more, and there is but one computer to do the work upon, and one person is typing, the person who's typing cannot be also the person who is, I guess, directing the action, right? You can't have an idea and then immediately type it in without first involving somebody else in the mob. So if you have an idea and you're at the keyboard, the correct move is to get away from the keyboard, swap out, have another person at the keys, and you communicate your idea, what you want them to do, whether at a high level, like I want you to, write an email to the project manager that communicates this, or I want you to write a function that, takes in 2 numbers and adds them. Or you could get all the way down to dictating the line of code, depending on how detailed the instructions had to be in order for you to convey your idea. But the point is, you have to convey your idea to somebody else who actually does the mechanical work of typing it in. That's what this is kind of about. And that brings us to like the main metaphor that I use for organizing the roles in an ensemble is one of a road trip. Say we're going on a road trip in a car. You're going to have a driver, a navigator who usually sits in the captain's chair right next to the driver, and then you have the rest of the car is filled with passengers. So you have driver, navigator, passenger. Those are the 3 roles in an ensemble. And the driver is that person who's at the keyboard operating the machine, right? And they execute the next instruction from the navigator. The navigator, on the other hand, is not at the controls. They do not reach over and grab the steering wheel at any point. That would be a terrible idea no matter what kind of road trip it is. And the navigator is in charge of verbalizing and guiding the driver to the next action, whether it's, turn right up here, or I want you to ease up on the brake because we're going too slow, at different varying levels of instruction. But the navigator tells the driver what to do, and the driver executes that instruction. The passengers are going to observe the action. They're going to stay engaged. Maybe once in a while, look out the window and enjoy the view, right? Maybe you can get distracted as a passenger. That's okay. That's okay, as long as you're ready for when your turn as a driver comes up, or you're ready to respond to something that you're expert in. Maybe maybe you're the SQL expert, or maybe you have you notice a grammatical error in what's being executed on the screen. You can pipe up. You can say, hey, I noticed this, or hey, you should try it this way. Now, the driver shouldn't execute instructions from the passenger. They should wait for the navigator to say, yes, what he said or what she said. That's a good idea. Let's do that. So the navigator's still kind of in charge of what actually happens, but the passengers are there observing, learning, and contributing. And maybe the most important thing about this is that we rotate these roles no less often than 10 minutes. So you're never going to occupy that chair for that long. Yes, Ken.
Yeah, something else that comes to mind in relation to this difference in reality is the concept of capacity-based planning versus flow-based work, where we think that because there's a bunch of people that are working at a keyboard, that must be less impactful because everybody's capacity is completely full. If you think about it from a flow point of view, though, you're reducing wait time for the flow of the entire work, which ties back to what you were talking about in terms of theory of constraints, where if people are available to jump into the work at the appropriate time with the appropriate knowledge, the work itself is going to flow faster, even though it appears that people are less busy.
Yeah. There's a lot of things, and this to me falls under the category of letting go of the way we think about how work gets done, because a manager might walk into a room or a Zoom where people are mobbing, where people are working this way, ensembling, and they might see two people really, maybe the driver and navigator, really, communicating and going at it, and then a room full of passengers and who are not as obviously communicating, and they come in and they get that snapshot and they say, well, there's like 7 people on this team that aren't doing any work, but like 10 minutes later it's a different 2 people, right? And to your point, it's they are assessing the productivity of the team by how many fingers are busy on keyboards, right? And as we discussed, that's not the slow part. So that manager then has to digest really, what does it mean for my team to be productive? What does it mean for my team to be busy? And maybe there's not such a cartoonish example of like walking into a room and saying, well, this team sucks because most of the people are not typing. But there are other similar ways of thinking about work that lead to that same outcome, that same judgment. And one of the things you have to let go of is, what is work supposed to look like versus, hey, let's look at the actual outcomes, the actual numbers, like how often is this? Maybe the Dora metrics come to mind as a wholesome way to measure at least a software team's productivity. How frequently are you deploying, and how high quality are those deployments? It really comes down to that. And whatever kind of outcome-based metrics, what is the team outputting? Not what is Ken doing, and is it better than what Sammy's doing? Which is kind of the way we've been taught to think about work, which is a way that kind of works for assembly line thinking, right? That works in a factory when you have predictable work and there's not a whole lot of coordination to be done, not a whole lot of mental syncing up that needs to be done. That's an effective way to monitor productivity. But it's like, in how many years of knowledge work and never mind software development, we haven't figured that out yet. There's inklings of figuring it out, but for the most part, we're taught that heads down typing faster is the way that work gets done, and it's wrong. Anyway,
have you compared this method versus, let's say, on a team of 9 developers, maybe breaking that up into 3 smaller teams of like pair programming type of a thing? Because what gets me is, I just really believe from seeing it, that you're just going to have a bunch of people sitting around and not really contributing. But I think if you maybe break that down into mini teams of this, you might actually get more work done because everybody is going to have to be busy.
There's some nuance to it. Yeah, you bring up a good point. So if you had a team of 9, right? What I usually see is that we all start at the beginning of the project. We begin as one large ensemble. We actually do the ensemble mechanics with the full 9 people rotating through, because we're all kind of trying to sync up, like, how are we going to approach this work? What is the culture of this team, which is really getting established at that point. There's also some big decisions being made about the project when you're doing those foundational steps, like, what tool are we going to use for this, or what, how are we going to approach this kind of pattern? We're establishing patterns. So that's a good idea to keep everybody together. But naturally, the team will start fluidly splitting off. Like, there might be 4 people that say, well, we could work on this over here while you 5 attend to that. Or, maybe 3 go over here, 2 go over here. And, but those things happen organically and they always come back together. So there's sort of I guess, I'm seeing drops of water coming together as puddles, and it's the mental image in my mind of this. But that's an advanced state of a well-formed ensemble, is that they
Yeah, what I would like to see realistically is, let's say we have 2, maybe 3, maybe like 2.5 on average lead developers, and then take each one of those and pair them with mid and junior developers and run these mini teams like this. Because inevitably, like, the leads always get brought in because, the juniors are, they're always going to hit a stopping point and say, I need help with this. I don't know where to go with this. So if they're paired off, each of them with a lead, then they can probably blow through each problem.
Can I tell you something else, Dave? You're right about the juniors getting stuck. If you have good seniors, they're getting stuck and communicating about it too. Everybody gets stuck. And this is one of the best ways to keep people from getting stuck, because everybody's, we've got the actual bottleneck, the brains, all together on the same problem. Ken?
Yep.
Yeah, like I'm thinking about a situation that I had with a small team where I had 2 architect level people in the team that clearly could have coded the entire application themselves. One was a front-end architect that had some back-end knowledge, and the other one was a back-end architect that had some front-end knowledge, and either one of them could have coded the entire thing. And inevitably, they would both come to the conversation with completely different ideas about how something should be done. And individually, their ideas were good, but together, when they worked out that conflict, the ideas were great and things worked even better. So, just one experience that I've had in terms of how closely folks work and why there's value in actually getting the senior folks together once in a while or frequently, actually.
Yeah. Well, and I'll add also that juniors are an essential part of every team, because you might have 2 seniors that don't think they have to, explain things to each other. But if you add a junior in the mix, suddenly we're talking out loud. We're giving verbalization to ideas that were just kind of, pre-verbal ideas. And all of a sudden, just like with the rubber duck on your desk, you might say something to the junior trying to explain it, and you go, oh, wait a second, this is a terrible idea. We should do it this way instead. And the junior, simply by being junior in the room and asking the question, has unlocked the group to a leap forward in productivity. I see it at least 3 times a week.
Yeah, I think the difference between the junior and the senior is usually the junior will be probably better at the tech because they just got out of school and so they know the latest tech, but the senior will be more experienced in a robust design. So a junior might just want to code something, but they're not looking out for the long term. Is this robust? Can I add new capabilities to this? They're just looking to literally code what they have to code, but not for future things that are going to have to merge in with that.
Sometimes. Yeah. Perhaps.
I guess I'm getting stuck on this idea. We got 2 guys that know what they're doing. the other 7 guys are watching them work. And what, there's a product owner that's saying, yes, no, yes, no.
Can I share this one panel comic with you?
Sure,
Two guys
please.
who know what they're doing, and somebody's watching them work. This is a much more effective illustration of what we're talking about. Knowledge work puts a pressure on the brain, especially if you have to not only do the thinking, but also operate the machine. One thing that we know from the Industrial Revolution, from Taylor's work, never mind, countless others, Ford's innovations and everything, is that the division of labor helps us to do, many hands make light work, right? If you can focus a person's mind on you just execute these commands and worry about the mechanics of the computer, and then you free the other person up to think about the problem abstractly and forget about the details of the computer, you have appropriately subdivided knowledge work to make it light for many hands to do it together. There is a version of mobbing, ensembling, pairing where one person watches another person work. This is a failure mode. If one person is watching one other person work, that is not ensemble working. This is not what we're talking about. So to further put we could talk about it or we could try it. And that's what I think is most important to do now. So what we're going to do is we're going to play a game, and I need at least 3 of you to volunteer to be our ensemble.
Is there actually a product owner in mob programming, or is that just sort of divided amongst everybody? It doesn't sound like there is one.
Yeah, it's not. There's mob programming, and then there's your team role makeup. And the best thing for there to be is for everybody on the team to be in the mob, in the ensemble. So if you have a product owner on your team or other kind of product manager, you're going to get the best results if they're present, because your people, maybe your engineers working on the product, are going to have a question about the product. As they do the work, information comes up. They learn something about the logic of what you've asked them to do, and they're going to say, oh, do you want it to work like XYZ or ABC? And normally when you're working heads down and everybody's being productive and typing, that involves, okay, well, we have to go schedule a meeting with the product owner, and we have to send an email, or we have to even sending a DM Slack, and that's going to interrupt what the product manager was doing, and they have to answer through, and then there's a delay before they answer, and then they have to interpret the answer on the engineering side, and there's like this whole disconnect. Whereas if he's right there in the room or she's right there in the room, we go, and they actually, the product owner has witnessed the engineers stumble upon this problem. There's no syncing up to do. There's no explaining it. There's just the asking, hey, which way do you think we should go here? And an instant answer, and an answer instantly applied.
But there is a product owner role, like a separate person?
Not as part of ensemble working per se. That's product owner is a Scrum role. That's from the Scrum framework.
Yeah, understood, totally understood. But I don't see how you could not have that, because then you're going to have programmers. That's a dual role, right? I mean, when I was a developer back in the day, I had a counterpart that was a systems engineer, but I had to go to them and ask them the question. So I knew how to develop, but I didn't know the domain, right? So I needed those answers in order for me to implement. But if you're saying that, okay, well, we don't have a product owner, I mean, somebody has to understand the requirements.
I'm not saying we don't have a product owner on the team or somebody like a product manager, right? I'm not saying that that's not involved. I'm saying that it's like, it's an orthogonal concern to the structure of an ensemble. You should, if you're doing work where, product manager has has a say in what, has knowledge to contribute, they should be in the ensemble.
Could we see the example, please?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's have, well, I'm going to need 3 volunteers at least. There's no cap on it. We could all do it together if you want. All right, Sammy, thank you. Who else? Dave, can I get you to play along?
Sure, I'll do it.
Okay, awesome. And Paratza, are you volunteering?
Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
volunteering.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to start. We're going to play Minesweeper. Have any of you played Minesweeper before? That's enough. Awesome. We got one Minesweeper expert in the room. And I'm going to put it on beginner mode. And this link that's our game. Okay, you can all log into this on your browser, and I'm going to share the screen so we can all see it. So I'm going to say, Sammy, you put your hand up first. Which role would you like to occupy at the beginning? Driver, navigator, or passenger?
Okay, I think because I'm potentially the only one who's played this, I don't think, or maybe I'll just be the driver and everyone else can just sit in the back and just watch what I do and what I think, and maybe psychically pick it up.
Yeah,
No,
if I may
I'll
suggest, what you were almost getting at was that you should be the navigator, the first navigator at least. So I'm going to suggest that strongly, if that's all right. Okay, who's going to be our first driver?
I will.
Okay. I don't know. All right.
So Sammy's going to tell me which things to click on, right?
That's right. And it's going to be, actually, it's going to be a little difficult. We've got a 9 by 9 grid here?
Yes.
Okay. So you'll have to, Sammy, I guess you'll have to work out how to tell them which box to click.
Okay.
Yes. So Paratha, again, you're being the driver, you have to follow exactly what Sammy tells you to do. But you can also ask questions and pose your own ideas. You just have to do it verbally. All right. Go ahead.
Okay, so what we're going to do is clear the mines here, and in the top left we can see there are 10 mines. And so if we just click one of the boxes, any box, doesn't matter to start with, this will start us off, but just one box.
Any box. Oh, wait,
Yeah.
I have to go over to, what's
The
it
link's
called?
in the chat.
In the chat. Got it.
When you click on that one box, it will probably be blank or have a number in it. That number relates to how many adjacent boxes have a mine in them. And so then we have to do
All right.
a process of deduction.
Let's see, I can skip the ad. I can see Minesweeper. I see the box, but I can't click on it.
Okay.
Make sure you're not looking at the screen share, Peretz, because you may
Yeah,
be looking at John's screen share rather than your own browser. So make sure you're looking at your own browser.
All right,
Have you-
I'm clicking on the link you put in the box, John.
Okay. Do
And
do you mind sharing your screen?
no.
Okay.
Just one moment, let me get back to.
Then take over the screen share. All right. And you've muted yourself, so we can't hear you speak if that was unintentional.
And I unmuted myself so I can speak. All right, I'm clicking on something in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and you're clicking on it and it's not working?
It's correct, it's not working.
Okay. We're gonna try something different. This is a mechanical problem I had.
Our first ensemble issue.
That's right.
I got 7 people
solve it
watching me
together.
click on this, and we don't have an answer to why it's not working.
Real life got in the way.
Yeah, really. Well, you can relax, because even though you're the one sharing your screen and you're the one clicking, I'm the one who's on the spot to solve this problem. So let's try something different. And this is where we might have, let me think about this. Okay. So
John, do you want me to
So
try the
I'm
driver?
guessing you've got to do like the sign up or the login in order maybe to use this thing.
there might be something like that. When I was testing this, it did open. Can somebody else try in their browser, if they open that link, are they able to interact with the game? Because when my
I
testing,
tried.
I was doing it.
I just tried it, John, and no, I'm not able to interact without, I'm guessing, either signing up or logging in.
Oh, forget it.
When I try to
Okay.
click on it, there's-
And
All right.
I'm here representing a marketing team, which is always complaining how inefficient our developers are.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Real life again.
You can do
I
some
mean,
marketing to them about this idea.
we can fake this out if you have a login and you're able to do it, and then people could just tell you what to do, I guess.
Oh gosh. Yeah, you know what? I don't have a login prepared, but I do have another idea. And so I think what we want to do.
Okay, hang on a second. I think I might have cracked it as a in our DevOps team. So I tried signing up. I signed up, and it still wouldn't let me do it. But then I clicked on the happy face, and that started the timer, which activated the game.
So if you click on the happy face, Peretz, does that get you anywhere?
All right, let's try again.
Oh, that works. I clicked on the happy face, and then I could click on it says four from the left on the top.
All right, wait a sec, I'll go back to share, go back to screen, and click on the happy face.
Yeah, and if you click on the happy face, it resets it.
I did it. Okay,
All right.
I followed the
First-
first instruction, which was to click anywhere.
Yeah, great. Okay, so now
now-
we've got a number 1, which means there's a mine adjacent. One of these squares that's adjacent has a mine. We don't know which one it is. So what I suggest doing, we're going to have to go a bit random here, and maybe click on another square just that's adjacent. We're just going to hope it's not got the mine in it. There we go. Okay, now we're in business. So if we go up to the top right corner, we've got 3 ones. So that which you're hovering over has got a mine on it. For sure. So if we
You want me to click on the one on the far right upside on the,
no. So that's got a mine. So if you right click it, and then we should be able to flag it. There we go. It's got a flag. So we're saying here that there's a mine there. So similar, the one in the top left corner, it's got 3 ones around it. Those ones aren't adjacent to, well, 2 of them aren't adjacent to anything else. So we can right click that, and that's got a mine. Now, just directly below your cursor, you've got a number 1 there. So if the one above it has a mine, it means that one that's diagonally to the right does not have a mine. Yeah, so if we left click that one.
Sammy, can I pause you right there? Excellent job. It's been a minute. We're going to rotate. Okay. So, Peretz, you're going to become the next navigator. Sammy, you're going to become a passenger, and Dave, you're our new driver. So, Dave, will you open up the link in the browser and share your browser window?
all right, I'm going to stop sharing.
Yes, that's right. And Peretz, you will be in charge of what happens next, and you're telling Dave what to do. And Sammy, you're
This probably
On
does
tap as
not
a
sound
consultant.
like a good idea.
I have faith in you, Prince.
one of my favorite things.
Thanks.
There was a new paradigm for developing software in small, tiny incremental commits called test and commit or revert. And I've learned about this from Kent Beck, who learned about it. It wasn't Kent Beck's idea. Kent Beck's the fellow who invented TDD. And when Beck was introducing this idea, he said, I hated the idea when I first heard it. And so I had to try it. And so generally, unless we're talking about something that's unsafe or violent, if you hate an idea, you should probably try it.
Brett, could you get the URL that you're using and paste that in the chat? Because we have to use that specific URL.
Looks like he's
All right, let's try and see if I can find it now. Here we go. Click, copy. I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, that is a different one. Yeah.
Try that one, Sammy.
Cool.
Oh, that's a different game altogether, I thought.
No, no.
So that's not
Specific
the
one.
Dave, is that the link that I dropped in the chat earlier?
No, it has a
you-
game number on it.
You should be seeing like the minesweeper.online. That's what I have.
Yeah, the link
So I've
that
just
Brett's-
Brett's link.
Yeah, I think you're on a different game, Dave.
It's not Minesweeper online?
No. It's the right. You're on the right site. But if you look at the end of the URL, there's a specific number, and
So
that's different than
change
the
the
number.
49 to 50 at the end of the URL, and that would be the right game.
All right, let me
It's
see.
12 at the end in the link that I sent.
It's actually, I think there's more digits than that.
Yeah.
I tried to send you a screenshot of what it was, but
Yeah. Just in the Zoom chat, there's a link that I posted before the one that Peretz posted, and that's our game.
I think the one that Peretz is using is probably the one you want, though.
yes, because that's the one I
Yes, because
just
that's the
took
one
the
he started
URL
clicking
from.
on.
Oh,
So
he
if you
started a
look up,
separate game. I see.
start a separate game.
Sorry.
The link that he has
I
in
don't
the
know how I
chat
did that, but
is
I
the
did
one
it.
that he started.
You're right.
You're not talking about this, right? This is
Yes,
this is
that's
the
our-
last thing I saw.
That's our
That's
game.
it.
That's our
That's
game.
it.
Sorry.
Okay.
Usually we do solitaire. This is my first time trying it with Minesweeper. So thanks for bearing with me.
I don't know anything. I've heard of this game, but I have no clue how this game works. I've never used it.
Then you are in the best position to be the driver because you're not coming up with the next thing to do.
Okay.
All right, Peretz, go for it.
All
Dave-
right, so if, and feel free to correct me when I'm wrong. The two number twos on top there, on the top three boxes, those are mines. Yes,
The
so,
these-
And yeah, Sammy, I would say Sammy can feel free to play in.
so
right?
Sammy, mark
Yeah.
those on with a right click, all three of those boxes.
Which two?
No, I'd say only two of them are mines.
Why?
Because the one directly, how do I explain this?
Please
The
do.
two in the center, they are the mines, because the one, the top right mine, below that there is a number one, which means that number one only has one mine adjacent to it, which means the mine to the left, to the left of the mine above it can't be a mine.
The top row.
Yeah.
The,
So
the middle of those three blocks, which have no marker on them.
yeah,
Right.
so it's center two.
You think
So I
that's
believe
not a
it's-
mine?
No. I think center two are mines, and then the one above the number two is not a mine.
Okay, let's try this then. Who am I giving instructions to again?
Dave is your driver.
Dave. Dave, do a right click next to the number two in the upper edge and the one underneath it, the middle box and the lower box. Right click on each one.
Nothing's happening.
Try pushing the little happy face first.
I think that might restart the game and
Yeah,
change
I
the
think
URL.
All right.
that resets it, I think.
Okay, so can I be the driver again?
Sure.
All right, let me try this again. All right, so we agreed, or at least I thought I was navigating, might say, that these two middle two blocks in the middle of the next one underneath it, those are both mines. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right, 1, 2. Okay, now we're pretty sure this is not a mine. And the
Yeah, because all
reason
the
we
numbers around it. Yeah, go on.
and the reason we think that is these 3 ones relate to this. You can see my cursor, right? Okay, so these 3 ones relate to that, and this number 2. Dave, you following this? These relate to there's a bomb and there's a bomb, a mine, I should say mine. So that means that's not a mine. We following this?
Yeah, ideally Dave would be able to click on that and you wouldn't have to even explain it that much. You just tell him to click on that one.
All right, Dave, tell me to click on this. No, Sammy has to tell me.
Yeah, click on that one. Yeah.
Boom.
Okay.
Okay.
We've definitely got a mechanical issue with our mobbing. So this isn't I apologize. This is not something I
No,
fucked
no,
up.
no, you're fine.
Yeah.
I don't mind driving.
Yeah.
And how about if Dave and Sammy do the switching of the roles part?
Okay.
Okay.
Before we move on, can we do a quality check here?
Sure.
Is our logic right?
What are we checking?
Just quality.
Quality of what?
What we've done so far, because I think we've got a problem. I think I've made a mistake because
Interesting.
if I look at those number 2s in the second row, they're both touching 3 mines.
Ah.
So what are you saying?
There's a mistake.
Meaning that these,
Okay.
one of those is not a mine.
That's right.
Okay, which one you want to say is not the mine?
Well, let's go through it. I don't want to be the single brain here.
Peretz,
'Cause
can I make a suggestion? Peretz, I would like you to, and this is going to sound funny, but I want you to think less.
Dave,
Simply
Dave, what do you
follow
think?
As the other
Sammy's
people in the
instruction.
group will say, that's hard for me to do, but I'll sit quietly.
Okay. It's okay to contribute an idea, but Sammy,
Okay.
what do you want Peretz to do?
I want Pretz to hold tight a second, and Dave, give me a hand here.
Okay, Dave.
What do you
Well,
think?
Well, let's ask Dave the key question. Do you understand the game now?
I do not understand the game at all. And this is actually one of the, I mean, I think this is a good time to bring this up. I do not understand this game. I've never played this game. And this is exactly what I've seen with pair programming and maybe not so much mob programming, but inevitably when you put a bunch of people together, but nobody really explains what's going on at the beginning of it, just like when you have a meeting, there should be at least minimal summary, then a lot of people's time is being wasted because you're dragging a bunch of people along that don't even know what you're talking about.
Right.
And
Yes,
this
Context
is
to communicate.
exactly the problem that I was hoping to point out, and it just happened to work out that way. There was no
Okay.
summary of what this is all about or what's going on. Not everybody is going to understand. You know, if you bring
Right.
up a user story, not everybody's going to have a clue what that user story is.
Let me jump in here, Dave, because that's my failing as one of the mobbing people, because I gave a little bit of a background that we want to find the mines without touching them. And also, I didn't really say too much about the game mechanics because actually I haven't played this for 20 odd years. But let me just go through it again. So we've got 10 mines on this grid, and we're trying to find where they are without exposing them because then they'll go off. So we're going to put flags on them. Now the numbers correlate to how many mines are adjacent to that number. So each time you see a number 1 on the board, it has one mine directly adjacent to it, be that above, below, left, right, diagonally up, diagonally that way, that way, that way, and that way. So when you have a number 2, it means that there are 2 mines that are directly adjacent. Does that make sense so far?
Adjacent could also be diagonal.
Correct. Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
So if you have 2, you don't, I mean, you don't necessarily know where they are. You
Correct.
just know they're adjacent.
Yeah. And so it's process of elimination. And what we did was we started with the number 1s, and we saw 3 number 1s in a corner. And so the one square that was adjacent to all of them, we put a flag on it. We assumed we're making an assumption here. So we're working in the complex domain here. So we wanted sort of to make little steps and then sort of review that. And perhaps in this instance, you're the junior, and I don't want to say I'm the senior because it's been so long since I've done this, but I'm sort of teaching you, I'm sort of bringing you on this journey to help skill you up, so that maybe, potentially you could sort of continue if I'm not here tomorrow.
That's exactly right. So I'm going to interrupt at this point and coach the mob. We've identified a problem. Brilliant. And Sammy's done a decent job, I think, of explaining, backing up and giving more context and explaining a little bit. Dave, if I put the navigator hat on you, do you have enough information to tell Peretz the next move to make?
You could be more forceful than that, John. You
Dave,
could say
tell Peretz what to do.
No, that's better. What am I doing next, Dave?
And I mean, so what are we looking for the mine, or are we trying to
Trying not
click
to blow
somewhere
up.
where we're not going to have the mine?
All right, wait, may I just make the suggestion that where the cursor is now, you contemplate what that means with the 3 1s adjacent and the 2s in the corner here. So that one, is that a bomb, a mine?
It certainly could be. I mean, my assumption is you can have on the left of the one in that second area, and above that, I mean, you could have one, I'm assuming, above that. So I don't think it has to be a mine, but it could be.
I'm going to make a strong suggestion on ways of working here. We're talking a lot and clicking very little, which makes sense because if we make the wrong click, we could explode. There's a low level of safety, at least fictionally, in this situation. As a general rule, when the navigator does not have a clear idea in their own head of what to do next, the best thing for that person to do is then act as a facilitator to the knowledge that is in the room. So, Dave, don't ask, you need to ask the room, ask Sammy, ask for his expertise, but don't ask for him to explain the rules. Ask for suggestions, options on what action to take next, and to help you decide on which one.
Okay, so what do you think are the best actions to go forward?
Well, what do you think, Peretz? You're driving, and before you click anything, tell us what you think.
Well, I'm voting for the mine to be where the cursor is on the left side on
Do
the
it.
top.
Yeah, right click it.
So, Dave,
Well, I mean,
before
my
Peretz, okay. So, Dave, does that sound like a good course of action? And then you would say, but we've already done it. So, go again. Keep going. What's the next thing that Peretz should do?
So Dave, I think that top row you've got 1 1 2 1 1, so it's probably a mirror image. So maybe with the ones on the other corner, I'd say maybe that was a mine. I don't know what you think, Dave.
You mean you're talking about where the cursor is?
Yeah, where the
Yeah.
cursor is right
I
now.
mean, obviously you
three
have
ones.
you have two ones that are adjacent to it, so that could be a mine.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I think. Yeah. And then that
Okay.
number two up there. Well, what do
Okay,
we
what
think?
about that one? The middle one.
That one's probably going to be a mine because you have two ones on the other side of the two, so that one's probably going to be a mine.
It's got a
As
number two above it, and that number two already has two flagged potential mines. So
oh,
if there
you
were,
could I forgot you could do diagonal.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, but those could be from the ones, I think, right? From the
so
ones on the other ends.
each number acts uniquely to itself. So number two has two mines adjacent to it, and a number one only has one mine adjacent to it. So that number two, we're saying, has two flags, so two mines adjacent to it. So it would be a number three if that one directly below it was a mine as well.
Okay.
So what are the possible courses of action?
Right click to flag a mine, left click to say it's clear. I'd recommend Dave you say it's clear.
Okay. Go with that.
All right. Oh, cool. More information emerges. Okay. So in the interest of time, let's pause there. Again, I apologize for the mechanical issues. This is a suboptimal rotation system. But I guess, Dave, you started at the beginning of our game on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the strongest. How strong of a Minesweeper? How strong was your Minesweeper knowledge? 0 to 10 at the beginning of our game.
Oh, 0.
Okay, where are you now?
I'd say I'm probably at about a 7.
That's pretty good. That is pretty good.
Okay, if that's the case, let's solve this one.
Dave?
Well, so
I'm just
all
putting
of
you
those
on.
are
We're putting you on the spot. That's not fair.
no, but that whole area is already revealed, right?
Well, Sammy's of the opinion, no, he's saying that of these two, where these twos are, they already have on the outlying side. Right, so now only one of those is actually a mine. The other one could be clear.
The twos are each touching 3 flags, which means they'd be number threes. And the fact they're number twos means that they can't be touching 3 flags.
Okay, I guess I thought I had a better understanding of this because I thought I mean we see the mines there, so I thought that part was already done.
Well, we mark the mines based on our analytical approach to this. And the other thing to say is Sammy might not be correct because these two flags goes with that number 2, and these two flags goes with that number 2. And you can see what I'm saying here. So that there is some relationship that could be each one of those is indeed a mine. Am I wrong, Sammy?
So it's not possible because if you look at the number 2, if you look, first of all, with this game, it's easiest to look at the lowest numbers possible first. So those 3 ones, so on the 3rd row, those 3 ones, if we go based solely on those, they each touch 1 mine. There's only one possible place that mine could be, which is directly above them. So that's got to be a mine. So based on that, the one above that is not a mine. So if I was navigator, I'd be saying left click on the top center flag. And I think there'll be like a number 1 there.
Dave?
Pressure.
I just don't know. I thought I understood this, but I mean, are those mines not really mines? We're sort of saying that we think they might be a mine.
That's right. We put a flag in it saying this is where we think it is,
So
but we
now
haven't.
you could click on it to see if it is a mine.
Yeah,
That's
flag
the
Yeah.
game.
confirmed.
Explode, but I'm fairly confident, I'll
I
step
mean,
on it.
if we're saying we think that's a mine, I mean, it looks fine to me.
No, I think
Well,
it's
no,
not.
Sammy's saying this one is, the top edge one is not a mine because these are the two that relate to that one and to that one. This is definitely a mine because it has the 3 ones next to it. This and this relate to the bottom two, and this relate to this bottom two, and to these two as well, right? So that middle, the very most middle block is clear, not a mine.
Okay, sounds good.
Now I can't click it.
Oh no.
Yeah, I couldn't click
got it.
anything before.
Oh, you
Wait.
cleared the flag.
There we go.
Okay. All right. A round of applause for our 3 volunteers. Thank you so much for doing the silly
right.
thing in front of everybody.
Wait, can we just do this other one down here where the 3s are?
No, let's back out of the game.
Uh,
You guys can team up and play this on your own time now that you know you love it.
This is like Princeton Minesweeper.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. But let's talk about the ensemble mechanics. Inability to switch drivers aside. So what was that like for each of you? I'd like to hear from each of you in each of the roles. What did that feel like to work that way with others?
Well, I think Sammy gets a meritorious service award for pointing out that upper edge was not really a mine. It was the number 1 because I had overlooked that.
That was a good.
I think if I had been doing this on my own, I wouldn't have noticed that. It's because I was talking about it out loud that I was like, hang on a second, I've just contradicted myself. Yeah, I would have exploded at some point because I wouldn't have got that.
Neat. What else? What else did you notice while you were working? Playing.
I think we kind of, I certainly feel pretty comfortable talking to Peretz and Dave. We kind of broke down a few barriers, having never met each other. Feel like we could sort of probably talk fairly openly, and if they said to me, "Hey, you've made a mistake," I'd feel pretty comfortable with that.
I was secretly hoping it would explode just for the fun of it. Because in
Well, that's
addition to being a quality assurance person, I'm also a little bit of a nihilist.
Oh, I love
I have to say, John, when you were talking about coordination neglect,
Hmm.
I was reminded of the book, the Mythical Man Month, where I forget the guy's name, but he
Fred
writes
Brooks.
Fred
he
Brooks.
writes about a particular person who goes around. This is long before Scrum Master product owners were created by way of namesake. And he identified a person who did exactly that role of the coordination, the assembly point, right? That book came out in something like 1975.
That's right.
And it has become a classic for every good reason. And I find that in my quality assurance test work, I perform exactly the same role as that person of this reintegrating or coordinating, reassembling the system after it's been taken apart and coded.
That's a fantastic thing to point out, Peretz, and I will also add that in my experience, nobody feels coordination neglect more than a tester. Nobody is more keenly aware of that problem.
Because who's the first person to get blamed when something doesn't work right?
Mm.
Like gets put into production.
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
Can I just jump in and
yeah.
just say, if we'd sort of continued doing this exercise, I think Brett's you seem to grasp it pretty well, and Dave, you were coming along to get there. I made a mistake, and I kind of knew what was going on. I think there'll be a lot more conversation sort of going around, and sort of bouncing ideas off each other, including people sort of get feeling more invested in it as well. I also sort of feel that we'd be taking on a bit of that product ownership because we'd know the outcome, and we might even start documenting how to do it, and it wouldn't require sort of the driver to stop to do some documentation.
Ken?
Yeah, so just a little bit of connection with some of the reality I think you were talking about, Dave. What I have seen in organizations when they don't do this is the junior programmer or the person that maybe doesn't know Minesweeper as much will probably be sitting neglected in a corner while the person that does know Minesweeper is doing all the work, and that knowledge transfer never really occurs effectively or quickly. Because you are mobbing, now you've got 3 people that at least have some grasp of the game and they're coming along, which makes the entire organization more effective. So rather than optimizing on a single person, you're optimizing on the group. So it's just an observation of what I've seen in the past.
I agree with that in theory. However, in practice, what I've seen is if you have, let's say you have 2 or 3 people pair programming, and let's say 1 or 2 of the people have experience in a particular user story. In general, I have seen that the experience will just, no matter what, try to get the work done. And the person that doesn't have the experience or the knowledge, it just sort of gets dragged along, but they don't learn anything from it.
Dave,
I
in that
get the
situation
theory
that you're
part, but I'm
describing-
talking about what I've seen in practice.
Sorry to interrupt. In that example you're talking about, did they use the golden rule that we were using, where the driver could not just immediately put what they were thinking into the machine? Did they have that proper separation of roles?
Well, so if you have the person that knows what's going on and a person that doesn't, and the person that knows what's going on is telling the person what to type, they're not necessarily learning anything, right? They're telling them to type and they're typing. That doesn't mean they're actually learning anything. I mean, if you tell me to type, tell me to type, hello, Nan, how is Jack today? I can type that. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm comprehending what that means. There's a difference.
Yeah,
one
you're
is
right.
mechanical and one is processing.
Sure. Peretz, can I ask you, did you learn any, since you were our designated driver, did you learn anything about Minesweeper while you were
Yes.
your instructions?
Once I saw it in operation, I was reminded I played this about 30 years ago. And that's why I didn't violently object to Sammy's suggestion that we mark that middle one as clear.
And I guess I asked you in response to Dave's issue, the fact that the driver merely following instructions, they're not going to get it maybe the first time or the first 10 times, but as you, and again, we need to rotate many times throughout a workday. You can imagine rotating every 10 minutes through these roles. you'd probably have many turns driving and many turns not driving. Over that, in that environment, you would maybe not become an expert, but you would certainly start to see important patterns, even while you were just following instructions. And you would be engaged with them in a different way than if you were just watching somebody else do them. Because if the instructions have to at least make it through your ears into your brain through to make your hands do the thing, you've processed it in a more engaging way than if you just witnessed it.
Yes.
So that takes time, but I think you do better doing that than, yeah.
I have one other thing to say about this idea of mob programming or the ensemble. Well, ensemble sounds like the nice way to say it, as you've been saying. In the more than 30 years I've been doing this sort of stuff, I know of one example where mob programming, that is a project that got so far behind for the US Navy, required the addition of enough people effectively doubled the team. The only reason that was effective was that everybody in the building had worked on that project. It was an entry-level project that the US Navy kept going for the company as the basis of training people to become more than just passengers or more than just drivers, to become navigators for their own projects, to use your terminology, right? So when they hit a deadline, what Dave was referring to as real world, where the US Navy works according to schedule and features, and it's supposed to work, and you deliver it the 30th of the month, or you don't get paid. The company was able to recruit all of these people, draw them in off their other projects, and actually get useful work out of them. It's the only time I've seen that happen. Every other example of some chief programming person saying, oh, we'll just add another 3 or 4 guys to it, made it worse. That's the end of my story.
That is the mythical man month in a brief example. I will also add one more thing, and then I'll let Sammy have the last word. Notice during our exercise, I played a role in there, in that I occasionally stepped in and gave one or more of you direction on how to orient yourselves to the problem, how to work with. I didn't tell you anything about Minesweeper, but I talked about how you were communicating with each other and which, what you should do. I was coaching the team. And if you just throw a team into this way of working without an experienced coach there to catch and correct and guide and nudge and shape the interactions, you're going to have a bad time. So in that way, Dave, you're not wrong that if you just throw people in a room and tell them to do this, it's not going to produce a good result. You need an expert there to guide and teach at first with them. Sammy.
So guys, we have 5 minutes left in this meeting, I guess, right? I'm wondering, as one of the co-organizers of this group, what the guys who have been silent in this room, what they think. Maybe Chris, Mahesh, would you guys, would you be interested in sharing what you think?
Well, I'm a completely biased sample. I think on my way in, I acknowledge that I'm a biased sample because I've been mob programming since 2012. And I bumped into Woody in 2015. I didn't even know what it was called. It was just the way that we worked at the place I was working at. And since then, Woody and I have been working together. So I don't work with teams that don't work this way. Right. And when we introduce ourselves or when we meet each other, we work this way, we try it. If they decide not to, that's up to them. Because ultimately, the reason why any team would decide to work this way is because they decided to work that way. They tried it, found things that were good about it, kept going. That's all it is. So as far as me giving my input, this is about as far as I can go with it. The last 3 companies I've been at consulting with are financial, banking, and mortgage. And we built all the systems this way. So it's, I don't think you get any more regulatory than those maniacs in finance and banking and mortgage, besides the federal government, which was right before them. So, and I'm going back to the Air Force soon for another gig. So, and we work that way there too. So it does work. You just got to get a little bit more practice at it, I think. And with that, I actually have to drop. So that was my bias. Drop in, cool stuff. Everybody take it easy.
Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you. Thank you.
What's
And-
the difference between this and is there a difference between this and mob programming? And also what's the difference between this and XP?
Good question. There's no difference between this and mob programming. They're just 2 different terms for the same thing. And that one of the main points that I'm trying to make is that this isn't just for programmers. So mob programming that's the original name for it. I prefer ensemble working. It's more inclusive. It's a little more peaceful. It's a little more accurate, I think. But yeah, effectively the same thing.
would be great to hear from Mahesh before we guys depart.
Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Hello.
Yeah, this is my first session. I just jump in. Yeah, we do work when we are solving the problem on the mostly in the initial stage of the project. On the design things, we involve more in everyone in the team. Once we got the finalize the design, then we won't get opportunity to work together. Everyone will work on their own responsibility, and then but when we get facing the problem, so that's where it'll be more useful to group together and then resolve the problems. So
Thank
work
you.
together, that will give brainstorming, that will give more ideas, more thinking that's happened. So that will be a more effective way on this.
Thank you. Sounds reasonable.
All right. I think we're hit time, right? So Sammy, did you have anything quickly that you wanted to quit? Because I know you had your hands up earlier.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about sort of quick retrospectives because someone mentioned that if someone's driving the whole time, they're just sort of clicking or typing what they're being told. That's going to get pretty boring pretty quick. And so just in the past, I've had sort of retrospectives where the driver said, you tell me that there's a dot missing or I've spelled something wrong before I've finished the line, I'm going to get angry. So just let me write a line, let me go over it, and then you can tell me what's wrong with it. And that's where they then sort of really do learn because they have to know how to write that line again.
Great.
I've
All right,
been on
thank
teams
you.
where we've adopted a 5-second rule before you speak up about the person's typing.
Nice.
Sorry, Ken, go ahead.
No worries. Thank you so much, John, for organizing this. We really appreciate your engagement. I appreciate all the organizers and the engagement from the participants too. Thanks for being willing to play in on this. So thank you all. Our next session will be on October 30th. We'll have a speaker event coming up and more details will come out soon related to that. John, again, thank you so much. Really appreciate everything.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks for having me, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone. Dave, we posted our links, LinkedIn URLs. Would you mind connecting with us? With me specifically, for example?
We can also do that via Zoom, or I'm sorry, via Slack.
And Slack, definitely, guys. Please join on Slack. Because when we, for example, when we talk about the next lightning talks Slack is typically where we start the conversation.
Thanks again, everybody. I hope you all have a great rest of your day or evening. Day
All
for
right.
Sammy and evening for everybody else.
Thanks.
Take care.
Yep.
Thank you,
Gotta
guys.
drop.
Thank
Bye
you.
for now.
Bye bye.